I
Hi,
and
everybody.
go
It's
for it.
okay. Okay.
Yes.
Hi, everybody. I'm super happy to be back with you. Thrilled work to be back and offer you another balade parisienne. But this time around, it's not a balade parisienne. It's a balade of région parisienne. So we're not in Paris. We are in the suburbs of Paris. Oof. But that's fine. There are a lot of great places around Paris. So the idea there, so I guess the first thing, so if I'm in Paris, how do I get to Saint-Germain-en-Laye? Well, you take something, and I know a lot of you have been in Paris, so I might be spoon feeding you or kind of don't consider this as, giving you, I know it might be both difficult or very easy for you. The RER is what it is. Once you have, if you've never done it before, it's very intimidating. But once you've done it, it's extremely easy. So there is something called the RER, which is the Réseau Express Régional de Île-de-France, which is basically like a very long, like a suburban metro. It brings you, you connect through the metro to the RER system and allows you to go to many different places in the région parisienne. So région parisienne is the region around Paris. So there are two ways to say it. It's région parisienne in a kind of colloquial way, or the official way is Île-de-France, the island of France. I'm not going to go into details of why we call it Île-de-France. It's more or less because France was basically built from Paris through the rest of France. That's how I interpret it, but there's probably a better interpretation. So there are five lines A, B, C, D, and E. So if you know the metro system, you know that this metro lines are are identified with a number. Here, they're like the RER lines are identified with a letter. So it's about 600 kilometers tracks with more than 240 stations. So while you are in, so you, I don't know if you've ever done it, but while you're in Paris, you can use the RER. It brings you from point A to point B probably much faster than a regular metro station, and it takes the same type of it requires the same type of metro ticket. But if you're trying to go out of Paris, you need to buy a specific ticket. And in order to access the RER, you need here you have a very long list. So there are a lot. Oh, I'm sorry. What happened? Mais qu'est-ce qui se passe? Can you see my
Yes, yes. We see the
ça
presentation.
marche? Okay,
You
so
just need
sorry,
to go
sorry.
back into you just need to go back into slide mode.
Okay, I will do that right away.
There. Well, you were in slide
Ça
mode.
marche.
There you go.
Okay, sorry, I don't have no idea what happened. So here you have a list of all the stations, RER stations or RER metro stations in Paris. This is still the ticket that you need. Again, if you are within the limits of Paris, it's the same ticket as a metro ticket. If you're going to Saint-Germain-en-Laye, it's going to require that you pay a little more. You go further, you pay more. This is where you buy them. So you see that these people are extremely comfortable in their purchase experience. You can either also, because we are in a time where you use less and less paper, you can use a Navigo Pass, or you can even use your cell phone. I don't do it. I find it extraordinary, but those are the options that are available when you are on. So just it's slightly different from an metro experience. You consider them as trains. So when you get on the on the in the metro station, you will get information on the train that's arriving. Be careful, not all trains go to the same place. It is like a train. It's not a metro, it's a train. So you need to look, you need to make sure that the name of the train, which is Tax Zitor Zita, is going to the destination you're looking for. This is another way of presenting all of this. It will give you how long you need to wait, the time, and all of the destinations. It's really like a train. It's less like a metro, more than a train. And very troubling, very different. The train, if you're used to the Parisian metro, which usually arrives from the left, here the train comes from the right. So don't be freaked out. That's just the way it is. So you arrive in Saint-Germain-en-Laye, and so Saint-Germain, what is Saint-Germain-en-Laye? So that was my little introduction to how to get to Saint-Germain. Now, what is Saint-Germain? So here, as you can see, this is Paris. You can see the Eiffel Tower. I've started from probably around Châtelet. In order to get to Saint-Germain, you need to cross the river 3 times. So this is the Seine. So the Seine is here. It loops once, it loops twice, and then it loops a third time. So you have to cross the river 3 times in order to get to Saint-Germain-en-Laye. So it's a 30-minute, sometimes 40-minute. The train, it's usually you have to stop at all the stops from Paris to Saint-Germain-en-Laye. It's not a long trip, but it's you're taking a suburbanite train. So um, and here, so you've arrived in Saint-Germain-en-Laye. So you have on the so this is the river, and we're going to talk a lot about the river because you have a wonderful view of the river at Saint-Germain-en-Laye. On the other side of the river, you have a very posh neighborhood called the Vésinet. This is a nice part of the Région Parisienne. This is the rich heartland where rich people live. I mean, so you're not going to an unknown, um, difficult neighborhood. You're going to a nice neighborhood, nice city. So, so Saint-Germain-en-Laye, so Kizako is a very colloquial say to say, what do you mean? What about? So Saint-Germain is like many French references. It's a French saint, usually long ago in the 6th century, and which might surprise you, he was known for his piety and his dedication to the Christian faith. At least he was not a martyr, which is good. So Saint-Germain, all of the Saint-Germain in Saint-Germain of Paris or Saint-Germain in other parts of the country, Saint-Germain-en-Auxerrois, are usually referenced to this Saint-Germain. En-Laye is more surprising. It's a nod to the town's geographic setting. So just imagine Paris in the 6th or 7th century. It was basically a small city surrounded by huge huge forests. So Laye is a derivative of the Latin word lata, which means broad or wide. So when the Frankic tribes took over France, they transformed the Latin the Latin words into a more Frankish, so giving in a more like a different type of pronunciation. So you pronounce it Saint-Germain-en-Laye, not en Laye. En Laye, just pronounce it as if you were talking about milk. Milk, as you know in French, is lait. It's exactly the same pronunciation, although it's a different spelling. So basically, just imagine Saint-Germain in the middle of the forests. So here we're going to talk about the main attraction of Saint-Germain-en-Laye, which is this incredible Renaissance castle, Saint-Germain-en-Laye. So the Saint-Germain-en-Laye is probably the most beautiful landmark in Saint-Germain-en-Laye and in France. So, I mean, I haven't shown it in my pictures, but when you get out of the RER station, you are faced with the garden, the castle. It's there. So it really overlooks the Seine Valley near Paris, as you saw on the map, and it started like many uh, French architectural sites. It started in the Middle Ages and really became a royal residence about 1824. So just imagine it as the summer residence of the French kings. Paris was a dirty, uh, very crowded space. And often the kings, especially in the Renaissance, like to get out of the city and live among nature, among beautiful spaces. So that's what Saint-Germain-en-Laye is. It's not the only Renaissance castle in France. You have a lot of them, but it's probably the one closest to Paris, and you can consider it really as the summer palace of the French kings and queens. So Francis I, Francois Ier, really transformed the royal residence, which had been established in 1124, and into a Renaissance building. So what you're seeing here, it really is a creation of Francois Ier. So here he expanded the gardens and added the chateau and the terrace gardens. So one of the main characteristics of Renaissance architecture, it's not just about architecture, it's about the experience. It's about creating spaces solid spaces that really interact with gardens. And that's probably um, uh, the most referential part of Renaissance architecture. It's also about creating spaces where people like to be together. It's not about creating small spaces, which is more of like a medieval way of thinking, so where you're protected, where people can get you. Here, it's opening up everything and getting everybody together. So there's a real focus on ballrooms in ceremonial spaces, which is very typical of the Renaissance era. So Francois Ier, or Francis I, who is he? So he is he was a king from 1515 to 1547. Again, 1515 is not when he was born. That's when he came to power. He was the first. He was the cousin of Louis XII, and he probably is one of the most prominent and the most archetypical Renaissance kings. He most famously invited Leonardo da Vinci in 1516 to come to France and work on his different projects. And that's where Leonardo da Vinci died in 1519, 3 years later. He was also very famous. He was at that time, France, which was the most affluent and most powerful nation in Europe, was opposed to the empire, the German Empire, with Charles V, and they were constantly warring each other, battling each other, and he was captured at the famous Battle of Pavia in 1525, where he was captured and imprisoned. And the Treaty of Madrid basically was all about him um, finding uh, um, replacing his imprisonment by the imprisonment of his two sons. So I mean, personally, I'm not a big fan of Francois Ier. I think he was a fairly um, not very responsible king, and he made his family suffer very much for his foils, for his faults, I mean. So he died in 1547, probably from um, either syphilis or gonorrhea. I mean, I just read different works about him. I'm not a big fan of François Ier, but he did really allow Renaissance to find its footing in um, in France, and he really transformed France. So he is a very influential, but not a great human. So when we talk about Renaissance, so if you remember 2 sessions back, we talked about Gothic, and I hope you still have that in mind. But when you talk about Gothic, by Renaissance, what do you mean? So first of all, it's really about arch windows and doors. It's openness to the outside world. Gothic was beautiful, but it has this idea of protection, of um, of closing yourself to the outside world. Here, it's a completely different um, mindset. You are open to the world, and in order to do that, you create windows and you create doors. So, and it really also finds a lot of inspiration from the classical work. So, a lot of arches. If you see here, it in a very different way. It looks like a Roman or Greek temple. A lot of rounded arches. So, and also in order to create contrast, in order to create differentiation, you work on different types of keystones and wedge-shaped stones that emphasize design, elegance, and prowess. It's very much still in the spirit of the Gothic style. You're here to showcase how majestic, how expensive something is. I like the castle of Le Château de Saint-Germain because it has this wonderful red color, which you won't see anywhere else. It really is unique in that way. So friezes. So we talked about different openings, but still there's this idea of reason of rationalizing the space. So you're gonna see a lot of horizontal, extremely linear, extremely organized spaces. So the way that Renaissance decoration does it is through decorated friezes and cornices. Elaborate and cornices are common. These details add visual interest and often incorporate classical motifs such as acanthus leaves, garlands, and mythical figures. But it's not just a question of adding features. It's more organizing the space. If you remember what we talked about 2 sessions ago about the Gothic, it was about like a explosion of different motifs, which kind of overwhelms you and gives you the idea that of the flamboyance of God. Here, it's idea of we've um, we're controlling this flamboyance and we're organizing horizontally. Rough and smooth stonework, and here it's very easy to show you. A lot of the contrast, a lot of the interest, a lot of the the, the differentiation you get from the Saint-Germain-en-Laye castle is through the different types of textures that you see. Here you see you have brick and you have smooth, probably concrete. I don't even know if concrete existed at that time, but you have contrast, and you do that from rough and smooth stonework, which creates a lot of contrast and a lot of space. Let me just go this. So again, one way to also structure the whole building. So we talked about horizontal alignment, but it's still at the same time this idea of moving everything up, uh, giving height, giving glory to everything, and that's through classical columns and pilasters. If you want your building to feel like it's rising above reality and going towards God, you just give it an extremely vertical way. So in that way, it's still very much in the um, within the framework of Gothic mindset. And if you remember when we talked two sessions ago, um, we saw a palace in Paris which really kind of organized or was mixing Gothic and Renaissance um, details. And here you have the same thing. Well, I mean, you have the same building, but maybe 30 years after, which is more an imprint of Renaissance and less of a Gothic imprint, but it still very much has a very religious and very um, um, sorry, it's very much drawn towards a religious ideal. So, speaking of religious ideal, and that's again what I guess what I was trying to come to in my previous explanation. It's this idea that even though the humanistic and Renaissance ideals have reached France, it's still very much in the middle of this emphasis and this um, enhancement of religious ideals. And a lot of castles, a lot of I would say lay buildings are built around religious structures. And that's very much what we have with the Chateau de Saint Germain. It is basically a castle that was built around a religious establishment, a chapelle. So a chapelle is a smaller version of the cathedral. It is often a very personal or very lay structure, and it was built by our dear friend Saint Louis, who was the most prominent king of the Capetian hierarchy or era in the 13th century. It really is. So if you remember all the details we described two sessions ago, so you have the arches, you have the extremely elaborate, extreme ornate decorations. You have these very Gothic arches, and you can see the difference between Gothic and Renaissance here, where you have a lot of details, where you have a lot of intricacies and elaborate details. If you go back to what we saw with Renaissance, you have a very more rational way of organizing um, details and spaces. So it's interesting that you have both space, but that's really the reality of what the 16th century in France was. You had this overwhelming Gothic style with these Renaissance details coming around. So um, so just imagine that this when people were going into the Chateau de Saint-Germain-en-Laye, they were in a very Gothic frame of mind, but they were in a new style. So it is, I mean, that's a very standard experience of every human being where like things move forward and you have old styles and new styles coming together in very distinctive spaces. So beautiful, lots of light. If you remember the Sainte Chapelle in Paris, this is without uh, the window works. It is very similar. And Saint Louis, who was the person who created in 1254, I think, the Sainte Chapelle was the person who built this. So this idea of kind of again elevating buildings, opening the spaces, making the light of God come through is very much present. The only difference from in regards to the Sainte Chapelle is that you don't have the vitraux. How do you call vitraux?
Uh,
Um,
Stained glass.
stained glass. You don't have the stained glass. So here's more like a very luminous light. You don't have the colored light, but it's the same idea. It's like letting all of that light the into the space, into the human space. And if you see that, it's slightly different from, I'm just going back, it's slightly different. You have smaller um, windows with the Renaissance. So it's less about letting God in and more letting the rationality of human mind come through. So, and the reason why I love the Chateau de Saint-Germain so much is that it is kind of a mix. It was built in 1540 at a time where you are going from the Middle Ages, and you're still not, at least in France, still not into the Renaissance. So there's a lot of negotiation, a lot of transition going on, and I find that fascinating space, a fascinating moment, a fascinating monument to really express that. So, as I said, one of the most important features, and really what really differentiates it from Gothic and medieval architecture, is this emphasis on outside world. A building is not just the building, it's the building and what is outside. So the jardins of the Saint-Germain are as interesting as in terms of visits as the inside. So you can't visit the inside without visiting the outside. It's it's a converging experience. So the also because the gardens were built by André Le Nôtre. André Le Nôtre is the architect that built the gardens from Versailles, which are the most gorgeous jardins à la française ever built. So he built them at the same time. So they're overlooking the Seine Valley in 1665, and they were more or less restructured and reorganized and rethought in 1845 by Alexandre Prosper because we really went from like a more French outlook to a more English outlook, which kind of really like a more irregular landscape. So here, which really emphasizes this idea of nature in of itself. Just remember that at the 17th century, it was all about reason controlling nature. In the 18th century, it's about nature expressing itself. So without human supervision and without human control. So you have this beautiful. So I can't unfortunately recognize the type of tree it is, but it's a gorgeous tree. It's still controlled, but so you have these very well um, structured um, um, plant creations, but you have also um, um, nature growing everywhere else. And also, which is probably the most gorgeous feature of these gardens, is they are overlooking the whole of the Seine Valley, and they're very much structured as a terrace. So you can see from you have a wonderful view, you have a wonderful overview of the entire region, and you can see Paris from the jardin of the Chateau de Saint-Germain-en-Laye. Even during the winter, it's beautiful. I mean, I didn't take this, but I was here, I was there during the winter. It has this magical, a very spiritual feeling when you get there. It has the feeling that whatever you do, these columns, these N4s are going to be there. Also, it was a huge inspiration for many artists. This is a painting from 1875 from Alfred Sisley. Is that it? Was it Mr. Alfred? Okay, because I'm asking Victoria because she told me that it was Alfred. Alfred Sisley was a very prominent Anglo-French impressionist artist, but this I mean, I'm saying like the Seine region where like it kind of like loops in and out of the countryside is a beautiful country, is a very scenic environment. But at Saint-Germain-en-Laye, it because it has this very wild environment, it really comes about. It it's beautiful. So let me just go into. So now you've visited the castle. You visited the gardens. You are peckish or thirsty. I mean, I would. So where do you go? So you don't go too far because this is France and a good restaurant and a good bar is never too far away. So you go to the Pavillon Henri IV. So this very, I would say, confidential, very normal building is one of the most gorgeous restaurants, bars, and venues in the Parisian region. So let's first say who was Henri IV. So as much as I don't particularly care for François Ier, I love Henri IV. Henri IV was so he was well, he wasn't, he was the first Bourbon king. So he was the king he became king during the horrendous civil war that controlled France from 1560 to 1590. It was a religious war where the Protestants and the Catholics were at each other's throats, and it was a time of massacre and strife. It was horrendous. But he, for reasons that are complicated, and I won't go into details too, but he became king in 1589 and managed, despite the fact that he was Protestant at the time, despite the fact that his kingdom was at war, managed to create peace among all their subjects. And it's a very interesting lesson in how one manages to become a symbol of peace. And I think in today's complicated times, Henri IV should be a lesson for everybody. So, most importantly, in 1598, he pushed forward and promulgated the Edict of Nantes, which is the only document ever, the only treaty ever that officially promulgated peace between Protestants and Catholics. I know it sounds very old fashioned right now because we've moved past all of this, but at the time, it was revolutionary. And unfortunately, because of that, he was assassinated in 1610 because of his willingness to create a space where everybody was comfortable with who they were and their own religion. So I guess because I've read one of his biographies not too long ago, I'm a very big fan of Henri IV, but I would really encourage anybody to know more about this man. He came from very difficult circumstances and he was able to rise above. He had to convert from Catholicism. He was a Protestant prince for many years, but he knew that by converting to Catholicism, he was bringing peace to his kingdom. And I think that's a very interesting way of thinking about things. So here, so if you ever want to have the experience of being, let's say, maybe la marque, la Duchesse de Pompadour, no, la Marquise de Pompadour, if you want to ever have this very 17th century where you feel that you are surrounded by beauty, by Rococo and beautiful details, go to the Pavillon Henri IV. Here, it's a place where you can have a coffee, a cocktail, you can eat well, but you can also celebrate your wedding, a christening, any type of things. It's an open space where you can rent the space, So it's extremely chic. You can see this beautiful view on the Seine Valley. Probably not right now, but at other times it would be wonderful. Here you can see it really l'élégance à la française. Beautiful lighting, beautiful furniture, wonderful food, great people, and great cocktails. So I really recommend it. And this is what I don't know if you ever, I don't think we've talked about it. This is what one calls un café gourmand. So it's you don't want to have a full dessert. You want to have a coffee, so you're going to order what we call a café gourmand. A café gourmand is a coffee with small sweet desserts. So they're very small portions. Here you have the chocolate cake. You have a little bit of ice cream. Here you have probably that's what do you call that? That's a
Crème
that's a
brûlée?
pistachio
Mm.
strawberry tart, and that's a
Crème brûlée? Flan?
crème brûlée.
Flan?
Merci beaucoup, merci beaucoup, and that's a panettone. So that's really the archetypical café gourmand. But if you've probably been to Paris, but you know that that's what you need to order if you want to just have a coffee and not eat a full dessert. So now, after my big explanation, we're going to go into
You're at
Saint-Germain.
10:40. You are at 10:40.
I think that's okay. Is it
Yeah.
okay? Am I
Yeah.
speaking too much?
Keep on going, keep on going. Don't
Oh,
stop.
I know. But here, so it's not just about the castle. It's not about the rich people. It's also about the city. So here we're going to go from. So that's the. Here you have the gardens, and we're going to go to this, which is la Grande Place. So autour de la Grande Place. So la Grande Place du Marché. So it's great knowing where François Ier and Henri IV lived. They're great, but it's not real life. So when you're at the Place du Marché, that's where Saint-Germain comes to life. And I'm going to give you 4 spaces where you can really get in contact with, everyday French life. So first of all, kids. So it's a very I'm going to say it's a very mineral environment. It's what happened in many cities and many small cities. You turn the main center point of the city into a very mineral, like with a lot of um, uh, monuments, and it's very open and very a little. What am I trying to say?
Dark.
It's very open. So you put cement and stone everywhere, and you put fountains in places, but it's still a little hot and a little um, not that personal, but it's still a wonderful place. So here you have at the which I love. It's the old post office. So that's where you can buy your stamps and open an account at the post office. So it has a very traditional French environment. That's how French towns are organized. You have a center, and then you just kind of like radiate outside. The center might be sometimes a little bleak, without much vegetation, without any gardens. Unlike, for say, an English town, but you have all of the important. You have the pharmacy, so you can find anything you need in the center. And of course, as we've spoke many times, you have the market, which for Saint-Germain is on a Saturday. So you can buy flowers, you can buy fish. I mean, you can buy anything you want. You can buy cheese, but it really is, you have to go there because it's only 1 or 2 days per week. And let's talk about cheese. we haven't talked about cheese at all since we've started our wonderful little explorations of French life. So I wanted to spend because these are cheese fromagerie, as we say in French, that I was invited, I discovered as I was visiting Saint-Germain-en-Laye. And I want to, first of all, tell you that let's talk about cheese. I don't know if you know anything, but I don't even know if you like cheese. But cheese is a big thing in France. It is a huge thing. As the famous politician Général de Gaulle said, how can you govern a country that has 258 varieties of cheese? I don't think at the time he understood how complicated his question was because there are 1,200 types of cheese and 1,800 different types of dairy. So by different types of dairy, I'm talking about yogurts, about cottage cheese, etc. It's a 6 billion euro per year revenue, so it's a huge thing. I personally have worked with French dairy French companies. It's a huge business. It's huge. It generates a lot of, and there's just a lot of many different issues linked to milk and linked to dairy. And there are many different types of cheese. You have fresh cheeses, soft cheeses with bloomy rim, fresh soft cheeses with washed rim, semi-soft cheeses, pressed cooked cheeses, blue cheeses, goat cheeses, and hard cheeses. I mean, only in France can you have something so intricate on something that is fundamentally just cheese. But I just wanted to spend some time sharing with you, not really sharing with you, but giving you a few pointers on cheeses that you might not know about, but which are so good, incredibly good. So the first one is Langres. Langres is it's a so let me just describe it: concave shape and a wash rim that develops a rich orange hue made with cow's milk. This cheese origins from the Champagne-Ardenne region of France. It's a lesser known cheese, but it's so good. It has creamy texture, so it's very creamy. It's very soft, but it has a lot of complex flavors which range from tangy to earthy and slightly spicy, and which I didn't know, you drink it with champagne. There you go. So it's soft, but it has this incredible last minute tanginess that for any cheese lover, I really recommend. Uh, excusez-moi. So Pélardon. So Pélardon is your typical goat milk cheese. It's extreme. So it's come from Languedoc-Roussillon, which is, where you have goats, where there's no vegetation, therefore you have goats. It's a small, soft cheese, which has inside a very creamy texture, but it's very robust. And it's very good with, very strong, earthy wines, but again, with very crisp and very strong flavored um, um, bread. So époisse. Does anybody know about époisse? Époisse is probably the most horrendous experience one could ever have in terms of stinkiness. I know it's a lot for Americans.
Worse than
It's a,
Stilton?
if only. It is so powerful. But it's, if you kind of, maybe you can put like a laundry
Egg.
peg on your mouth, on your nose. Uh, it will go because it's an extremely pungent cheese, but in terms of taste, it's wonderful. But it's so smelly.
Comme le maroilles.
Oh, it is au même niveau. Au
Ouais.
même niveau, same level. It is, but I have to say, it was kind of like, kind of like oozes stinkiness. You kind of look at it and you're just like, what is that? And you kind of poke it, and you're just like, I don't know. I really don't know. But then when French people tell you you have to eat it, you taste it a little bit, and then you eat the whole thing. French people are very good at kind of like opening you to the stinkiness of life, I guess. So it's reddish orange, and in cases it's very gooey, but it's a rich savory. It's not as bad as you think it would be. And then finally, Beaufort, which is a very so it's completely the opposite of Epoisse. It's both it's extremely alpine, very mineral, very healthy feel. It's I would say it's a more uh flavorful, less obvious version of Comté. I mean, it's a little, it's a little more original. You really feel like you're in the Alps, in the Savoie when you're eating Beaufort, and it's wonderful. And you eat it with very strong wines, very hearty type of meat, not meat, bread. So it's wonderful. It's sweet, floral. It really is extremely flavorful, but don't mix it with other types of cheese because it will overwhelm anything. Epoisse will just disappear if you're eating with Beaufort. So there you go. So we can do other explorations of cheese if you're ever interested, but I felt that exploring cheese, right? It's been our eighth balade, and we haven't even spoken about cheese. And I think it's such a significant part of French experience.
And the cheeses that you presented here, those are cheeses that you would find in a typical fromagerie?
Well, and I think these are French cheeses. If you're willing to pay a little bit, you can find in United States. The only one I don't think you'll ever find is Langres,
Yeah, and
which I personally,
it's a
it's
different
complicated to
process
find Langres, but
in the
it's
US.
of all the five, it's my favorite. I love Langres. I mean it, but
Mhm.
it's very powerful, but it's
Potent.
no, it's not potent. It doesn't smell. It's not Epoisse. Epoisse is horrendous. It's
Mhm.
horrendous. But Langres is very good, but it's probably the strongest taste you get. Cheese is weird because sometimes they don't smell anything and they have a very strong taste, and sometimes they're very stinky, and their taste is very mild. So it's all about exploration and figuring out what you want to do. So now, enough about cheese. If you're ever in Saint-Germain-en-Laye, there are two incredible restaurants that you can discover. The first one is Le Vautier, which I've been to. So you have to know that in Paris, you can go to very pristine, very beautiful restaurants, which will have incredible service and incredible food. But when you go outside of Paris, you're going to find yourself with more, I would say typical, but more uh, simple restaurants in terms of architecture, in terms of service, but the food is incredible. So don't be don't be um, don't be concerned about the service that you get. It's all about the food. So Vautier is 31 Rue Vautier. So it's just off the Place du Marché. It's a wonderful restaurant that does extremely elaborate, ornate food. So really, I would recommend if you go there for lunch. It's wonderful. So that's a salad. So that's pretty elaborate. And then you have this wonderful seafood soup, which is, I would say, broth, which is so tasty. I went there with my friend Florian, and we had such a wonderful time. Another restaurant is, so it's not French. I'm going to say we're going a little bit, but Portuguese experience is very much drawn to France. I mean, it is really in Région Parisienne, and I personally love. So you can see the cable car, which is a feature of Lisbon, and I love Portuguese food. And here it really is. How can you take wonderful food and make it very French and very elaborate without making it too foo-foo? So here, if you like if you like seafood, it is a wonderful experience because as you can see, that is octopus. And I'm not particularly fond of octopus, but they have a way to present it that is, I know it is organic. I know. That's these are tentacles. That's how the octopus figures out what's going on in his world. But it is wonderful. And it's really when you go to Portugal, and if you've never been to Portugal, you must go to Portugal because it's a wonderful country, extremely rich in terms of culture and extremely welcoming in terms of hospitality. So here you have this wonderful, and it's also an extremely generous culture. So when you go to a Portuguese restaurant, you're going to get your money's worth in terms of food. I'm just saying that. And you also have here wonderful mussel soup, which I ate that, and it is so both extremely hearty and very delicate, and it's wonderful. They also do, they have this amazing way of cooking sardines. I mean, I don't particularly care for sardines, but if you ever go to a Portuguese restaurant, eat sardines because they have this way of cooking sardines in them and offering them with boiled potatoes and white wine. I mean, I don't think I could. Once you eat it, I don't think you can ever eat anything else. It's so good. It is so good. So both go to this restaurant, and if you ever have the opportunity to go to Lisbon, go to Lisbon. Oof. But also be ready to walk because it's a very hilly, full of hills.
Or take an
So,
e-bike.
I mean, like, don't, it's very physical. I mean, I personally don't think that I can do it anymore, but I love it. So now we're going to go after going to the cheese shops, the fromagerie, and the restaurants. We're going to go to something completely different. We're going to go to the Musée départemental Maurice Denis and discover the Nabis. So the Musée Maurice Denis is a wonderful museum. So it was reopened last year after 3 years of construction or renovation. It's not a great picture because I can see now that it's a little lopsided, but still, it was built and it probably is the only place in France where you have all of the Nabis art um, uh, um, put together. So you're going to ask me, what is Nabis? That's a good question because I knew about them, but they're not a very prominent, but still. So Nabis were like an avant-garde group of the late 19th century that were very active. It's a very French movement that kind of uh, existed at the same time as the post-impressionists as Van Gogh and what's his face, Gauguin, and they revolutionized painting. So Nabis comes from Hebrew, which means prophets. So it's very much in that idea of art being kind of like moving culture in moving forward culture. So founded by Paul Sérusier, Pierre Bonnard, and Maurice Denis, among others, the Nabis were very much at the same, really existed at the same time as the post-impressionists. So Gauguin and Van Gogh, with this idea of both color and symbolic content, and really no differentiation between what is color and what is symbol, like the both kind of melding together, with a strong emphasis on flatness, bold colors, and decorative elements. But really, what kind of differentiates the Nebbies from the post-impressionists. Well, whereas the post-impressionists were more or less pagan in their endeavors, the Nebbies were very mystical and religious, and took on a lot of symbolical explorations and themes. So also they were very much influenced by Japanese art. If you know a little bit how about history, you know that by 1870, by 1880, when finally Japan opened to Europe around 1860 and 1870, Japanese art came on the European scene, and many artistic styles were very much influenced by Japanese art. The post-impressions, the flatness, the symbolism of art, but also the nabis. So here, where you have more of again, as I said, a pagan view of art, with the nabis, you have a more symbolical and focusing on dreams, on unconscious and mythological themes. And their contribution allowed the emergence of Fauvism, which is also a lot about symbolism, but mostly about abstract art. Without the Nabis, abstract art probably would have never emerged, because they really allowed to get out of the physical reality of art and go into a more unconscious, symbolic route. So you also have a lot of focus on again, and it's interesting how art is always different, but always is the same. Here with Vuillard, you have an artist that was very much interested in the contrast between structures and between textures, as we saw in the Renaissance. So here you have an extremely I would say nearly medieval way of depicting things, but with a very ornate and very classical environment. So as much as the art of itself represents in itself an interest, it's also the context of the art itself that shows where you find an interest, and mastery depicts the interplay of patterns and textures. Again, also very spiritual. It's less about situation and it's more about ideas, symbols, about situations. And Maurice Denis is probably the most religious, I mean, I wouldn't say religious, but at least more spiritual artist of all of the Nabis. And I would definitely recommend going there. I know it's a little bit far field, and if you're not planning on going to Saint-Germain, it may be a little too far away. But it's it really is, because it's a very well organized and a very well created space where you have a very driven type of view of art, and I love going there. So after all of that, where are we? How much time do we have?
We are at 11:03.
Oh my God, I'm so chatty. Gee. So I just have one last stop. So here is Le Plana, and we're going to go up this street, which is the Rue Saint-Pierre, and then go. And I'm just going to, so here is my little plug-in. My very good friend, and she's the one who recommended that I do a session about Saint-Germain-en-Laye. My good friend Florian has this gallery, which is also an art site, machi.art, called Machi, and she promotes young French artists. So if you're ever looking for art that is affordable and yet very interesting and very acute in its artistic endeavor, I would highly recommend you visit Manchi.art. I personally love the art, and it's extremely affordable. I mean, you have small pieces from 150, and it can go up to 10,000 euros, but really, she's not, it really is maximum 2,000. And it has a very focused and very interesting artistic endeavor, and I really like it. So, and you can find her in Saint-Germain-en-Laye too. So she has now a permanent structure and this Mechi.art. So I would recommend anybody to look there. She can send anything from anywhere, and it is very special. I mean, it sounds a little stupid to describe art as very special, but it always has. She has a very strong artistic, and she's wonderful curator. So I would recommend you to look at it. So finally, let's let's finish and like again, we're going to look at an église, at a church, but it's a very different type of église. If you remember our first visit, which was 2 years ago. I know it's been a long time, but we saw the Église Notre-Dame de Lorette, which was a very similar building, which was this kind of temple-like church. So these are basically churches that were transformed during the revolution, where there was obviously a very strong desire not to have spaces that were not extremely religious, but that were spiritual. And this idea of transforming churches into temples was a very strong idea of the revolution, among many other ideas. But so in turning churches into places of spirituality, into spaces of reason. So it was transformed in 1765. Also, I mean, it's not just the revolution; it was just globally by the end by 1760, the whole Rococo period had ended, and a lot of people wanted to transform anything into neoclassical, which is basically transforming anything into a Roman-looking temple. You look at Russian art, German art, and English and French art. A lot of things all of a sudden become Roman temples, and that was very much in the idea of the time. Um, so it was restructured, but really the whole restructuring and the renovation of the church itself was done in 1816. So sorry about the picture, it's not great, but in of itself, inside it's a very Baroque with pillars and very classical decoration. It's very spiritual, and I would definitely recommend going in. Two main features. They have a wonderful organ, which was not destroyed during the revolution, so good. And it is pretty much the same feature. And we talked about it in maybe Balade 4 or 5 about organs. Organs are wonderful instruments because these are instruments that were built 300 years ago and that are still played based mostly as they are right now. So if you're into, which I mean, I really like into religious music, Bach, etc., go there because they do wonderful recitals. And the most incredible thing, so if you know anything about English history, you know that James II was a king who was deposed in 1689 by the Parliament. He was the son of Charles I, who was decapitated in 1649, and he was the brother of Charles II, who was king from 1660 to 1685. James II, when his brother died, Charles II, without any heirs, became king. The only issue was that James II was a Catholic king in let's say within an Anglican environment, and he I think, very awkwardly tried to promote Catholic views, and he was deposed in 1688, I think, or 1689, in a revolution called the Glorious Revolution. So the Glorious Revolution pushed James II out of France, and he was exiled and went to live with his cousin, Louis XIV. They had the same grandparents, Henry IV. They were both grandsons of Henry IV. It's a complicated family situation, but still. So, and so James II died in Saint-Germain-en-Laye in 1701, and he was buried and had a mausoleum built in 1701. So if you want to know why it's important, I don't know if you know about the show called, I forget about it. I'm completely senile. What's the show where the woman goes into the past in Scotland?
Oh, the Outlander.
Outlander.
Outlander, yeah.
Outlander. So Outlander is all about the Scottish Jacobin revolt of 1746, the Battle of Culloden, and the Stuart King, Bonnie Charles Stuart, was the figure that forced what I'm trying to say. He is the person, like he drove the Jacobin insurrection, and he was James II's grandson. So I mean, you really have a kind of like a small picture of how different Europe was, where it wasn't a question about nation, it was a question about family and a question about religion. So it's very interesting that James II is buried in Saint-Germain-en-Laye, and that he had such a significant part in the uprising and then the defeat of Scotland in 1746. And today, because of Outlander, it's such a significant part of the zeitgeist. So, and if you ever want to read something very interesting about English history, read the story of James II. His son was, I think, James Stuart, and his son was Charles Stuart. They were called the young. So James Stuart was called the old pretender, and James Stuart was called the young pretender. And they died in exile in Italy. It's a very interesting story. It's a little sad because they didn't do much, but it's very interesting. So once you get to I don't know what that is. So once you get to the church, you're basically a second away from the RER. And if you've done your work well, you have
The ticket.
two-way ticket, and you can go back to Paris. Just be careful when you go back from Saint-Germain-en-Laye to Paris. You're going to go through La Défense, so you're going to see a lot of people coming in. Don't be afraid. That's just
It's a busy
it's
station.
a busy time. How do you call it? It's
Rush hour.
rush hour. Exactly. It's rush hour in France.
D'accord.
So here you go. That's Saint-Germain-en-Laye. So do you have any question? It was
So we
very
have-
fun.
So let me tell you, there was a couple of things that popped up in the chat. There's Moha who just wants to scream from the rooftops, Vive les fromages.
Oh,
Then
Givre.
and then there is Linda. So Linda, would you like me to read your question, or would you like to ask the question yourself? You can unmute yourself. Linda?
You can read it, that's fine.
Okay, so we've got So she said, Linda says, I liked your discussion on the transition between Gothic and Renaissance. Could you give an example of a purely Renaissance building, and when, if ever, was the transition complete?
In France, it's complicated because you don't have that. I think you can really see them in Italy. You have purely Renaissance building. If you go to Florence and if you go to the Medici, the Palazzo Vecchio, it's a purely Renaissance building. Just in Europe, and you have in France and in England, it's just that Gothic was so prominent for so long, there's more of a mix. So you'll never have, I don't know of a, I don't know of I don't know of a building that really perfectly encapsulate all of the Renaissance ideals. So you'll have the in France, in Paris, you'll have the Palais of what's the name of the palais? Le Château de Nesle, Le Château de Nesle in Paris, which is very much all about mixing Gothic and Renaissance features, and you have the Palais that is very much mixing Gothic and Renaissance. But at the same time, there are very few buildings in France that are purely, except for the castles, at least there are very few people in Région Parisienne. You have a lot of castles like Chambord, like le Château d'Amboise, Azel Rideau, Chenonceau, which are very Renaissance, but very often in Paris because of the constructions of destructions and construction and renovations of many buildings, you have more of a classical, which is more of like a not a 16th century, more of a 17th century view of Renaissance. So more majestic and less geometrical.
So that's in the Région Parisienne, but are you saying that
Yes,
if you
yes. I
go
mean,
to
if you want to
the-
see, and it's very difficult to see pure Renaissance buildings in Paris itself because they've all been renovated. You can see Renaissance architecture in Saint-Germain or the beautiful castle at Fontainebleau. And if you want to go in the Loire Valley, then you see a lot of them. You'll see at Château de Blois, Château d'Azel Rideau, Château d'Amboise, Château de Chambord, Château de what's Chenonceau. They're beautiful, but they are castles. There's very little civic Renaissance buildings in France, which you see a lot in Italy. All of the buildings in Florence or Siena or Pisa are Renaissance civic buildings.
Mhm. All right. Well, thank you for that. There is a little comment posted by Shirley, who spent a little time in Saint-Germain-en-Laye back in 1966, and her question, and I don't know if you have the answer to this question, but she would like to know if the American Army base is still there.
No, no. There are no more army bases in France since one of the big events of the 60s was when the Général de Gaulle left NATO and basically asked all of the American forces to leave the country. And since 1967 or 68 or maybe 9, I don't know when, there you don't have American army bases anymore in France, which you had in Germany for a long time.
Mhm.
I remember going to Germany and surprised how prominent American bases were in West Germany. So no, France, I don't know if France has re-entered NATO. I have to admit, I don't know. But for a long time, France was out of NATO, um, putting forward its non-alignment on the during the Cold War.
Okay,
So no,
okay, so let's see. Linda, is your hand raised? I mean, you have a raised hand.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
yes,
Thank you for your explanation about the architecture, but I wanted to ask, whenever I've been in France and they ask, "Oh, would you like some cheese?" And if I say no, like their face just falls. And
well,
how
that's
can I,
welcome to France.
how can I say it and
It's
make them feel a
it's
little
it's
bit better about saying no?
well, I would say not liking not liking cheese in France is like not liking alcohol in England. It's considered a flaw.
I, I can tell.
I mean, I remember being with English friends, and when you say at 10 in the morning that you don't particularly feel like drinking champagne, they look at you like you're a mutant. That's you just have to deal with it. I would say find a cheese that you, I mean, I don't know if you're lactose intolerant. If you are, just tell them that you're lactose intolerant. They will look at you like you're a freak, but that's, and if you're not really into cheese, find a cheese like Comté is
Like,
great because it's
Conte
generic.
is my favorite. Yeah.
Yeah, so just ask Comté, just say like, oh, I have stomach issues. I can only eat. And it's now French are a lot more open to the fact that, all things considered, cheese is not that easy to digest. You eat it with bread, you always feel bloated afterwards. And now more and more the conversation is like, I stopped eating cheese. I love cheese, but I stopped eating cheese. So just like say like un tout petit peu. Un tout
Say
petit
that.
peu. And if they
Okay.
offer you one of those, like, and I don't know where you are, if it's like époisse or vacherin or like those goddamn cheese, just say no. Just say no. Because
Okay.
those are it's too much.
But
Époisse is
they're
wonderful, but
delicious. They're delicious, but they are, they're
oh my God.
difficult on the digestive system, especially
Yeah,
if
you just
you have
regret it for like 4 days in a row. Like I should
Okay,
have.
okay. Okay, James, not everybody has the same experiences as you with cheese, so.
I mean, but I think we all get a little bit lactose intolerant with age. I mean, it's just a lot. Époisse is wonderful, but vacherin is like,
Okay. All right, all right. We have a couple of more
okay,
comments.
good. Go ahead.
Leave wanted to mention that NATO rejoined, France rejoined NATO back in 2009.
Oh, good for a good
It was
and
actually
Yes.
it was
how
under
embarrassing for you
Sarkozy.
for not knowing that. I mean,
It was
yes.
under Sarkozy.
Yeah,
Yeah,
strangely
and
enough.
now I know, but I remember me growing up like, I mean, in a very anti-NATO environment, like, oh, but yeah.
Okay,
So
and
no basis, no basis.
and Lee just wanted to mention that goat cheese is preferable if you have any lactose intolerance issues.
I do agree, but I have to say, goat
Yeah.
cheese is kind of always the same. So I if I have to eat cheese, I would prefer because milk cheese has this ability to kind of like give a lot of different flavors. Goat cheese is always
Chèvre, 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 chèvre.
c'est toujours chèvre, c'est toujours le même truc, c'est toujours la
Yeah.
même expérience.
And also in the States, a lot of people don't really eat cheese, and it's like people who don't eat beef. When you eat something that your biome, your stomach is not set up to digest, it's a problem.
For
Oh, I
sure.
know. I know. I mean, it's been a brutal experience, but I've, if you think that you can really eat what I mean, I love eating cheese and bread, but the day after.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
the great thing about tasting cheese in restaurants
TMI.
is that you are
know,
limited.
uh,
You're limited with, in amount. It's all about amounts. If you do a little bit, it's fine. If you want to
Right.
gorge yourself on cheese and bread, well, that's not a good idea.
No.
That's never a good idea, regardless
I
of.
mean, anything, and cheese, I think, is good. And you just have to know what you're eating before, what you're drinking with the cheese. I mean, it's knowing the environment.
Yes, but also you have the situation, at least when I went to my cafe, is if you say no at the outset, nobody offers again. And so I was
No,
basically told, you don't
no,
say no. You do a little taste.
Mhm.
no.
Yeah.
And it depends, but it's true that when you're having a dinner and you're inviting people, there's always somebody who's going to say, "J'apporte le fromage," and bring the cheese, even if you don't like it or not.
Mhm.
And not offering cheese to guests is considered, you are not a good guest.
Host, not a good
It's
host.
very
You're
easy
not a good
not to
host.
offer dessert.
Yeah.
It's very easy. Oh, I'm just going to bring strawberries or fruit. That's fine. Not bringing cheese, it's like, excuse me, I came to your apartment and you're not offering. Who are you? It is very déclassé. It's gauche.
Taco gems. All right.
No, it is. I mean, I'm
Well,
not saying it,
no, I mean,
I know it sounds ridiculous, but that's the reality of inviting people in France.
Mhm.
I,
I
Okay.
know
oh,
it is like it's comme ça.
Okay, I am just trying to make sure that everybody has, anybody who has a comment, a question,
please have a
has
comment.
an opportunity to raise their hand and ask. I see Liv's
Please.
hand is raised, so
Well-
go ahead, Liv.
I just wanted to mention, especially James loves all those cheeses. I love them too, but I can't have them anymore. You have quite a few tasty, unpasteurized cheeses in France that we can't have here.
Mhm.
Oh,
Yes, yes,
Okay.
very true.
It's the
I
pasteurization
just want to,
process.
and the taste is so, a camembert that is made with unpasteurized milk is just,
It's a
Fully
different
that.
I
experience,
just
know.
want to bring that up. Mhm.
and you don't get that in the US because
No.
everything has to be
well, I
pasteurized.
mean, to be fair, you get a lot of pasteurized experience in France too. I mean, lait pasteurisé, that's really 75% of the experience. That's a fairly it's like non-biodynamic wines. It's a new experience. Those non treated biological products. I mean, like you get them more and more because people are less and less able to deal with them. All of that is the industrialization of these processes that makes it difficult on the biome and overall body.
Mhm. Okay, do we have any more comments, questions?
I have,
Oh,
Go ahead.
cool.
I think I'm fortunate. I don't really have any problems with cheeses.
Good
Paris
for
was
you.
great. Italy was great. I found the amusing thing was a friend of mine complained about the fact that he couldn't get a decent cheeseburger in
Yeah.
Paris. But I found the most extraordinary thing about traveling in Paris was finding a public bathroom was
Oh, it
insane.
is.
Yeah, good
And
luck
no.
with that.
To be
Well-
honest with you, the only one that I found, I had a bizarre experience in a portable one, where we found public bathrooms in a McDonald's.
Well, you're goddamn right. That's yeah.
Yeah, it was
It
tough.
is. It is. So never. I mean, I know how difficult it is as you
Get
mature,
older.
get older. Yeah, that's a good way to say it.
I've
How
had the-
difficult.
I had the problem when I was in the army,
Well,
at 18.
but when you're old, when you're younger, you don't mind peeing everywhere. I mean, when I was young, I would pee everywhere. So it's, but it's
Again,
fine. I
the
mean, I'm not saying I
TMI.
peed on
No.
anywhere, but like Paris is the city that, but it's true that if you're trying to do it within the bound, the boundaries of good taste, it's complicated. So I would, and McDonald's, thank God it exists,
Yes.
because you can,
But
but you can also go in a cafe and say, listen, I need I need a coffee. Give me a coffee, and I need to use your bathroom.
Yeah.
Yes, that's what I was just gonna say. You put a euro on the table and you say, for the toilets.
Genre, est-ce que je peux avoir un café et où sont vos toilettes?
Mhm.
Well, just
Yeah.
as an amusing thing, and I don't know how amusing it is, about 2 blocks, maybe 3 from the hotel I was in, I was heading down towards the Louvre, and suddenly I had to use the bathroom. There was a portable bathroom. I went into it and it started cleaning itself while I was in it.
Hopefully the
hot
doors
soapy water-
didn't swing
mean-
open while you were in it.
Hot soapy water pouring all over my feet at the time.
Oh,
Those-
fun time.
Those goddamn portable bathrooms, they are, I mean,
was
they
a lot.
are, I mean,
It was hilarious, but it was like,
it's hilarious, but you have a 50% chance of having a difficult experience with them.
beyond that, I thought Paris was fantastic. I
I mean,
had 2 foreign exchange students. One, Candace, Paris, she was a Parisian. She took us down to a restaurant that she loved. It happened to be in a red light district, which was hilarious.
okay. So
Yeah, well.
I know that my mother's online. I can tell you that my mother was stuck one time in a portable bathroom
Yeah.
and she could not get out. Maman, t'es là?
Non, elle est partie.
Elle est partie. Okay, donc,
Ouais.
so she's gone. Good.
Je
I can,
suis là.
Oh, tu es là, okay.
And I got locked in there at the Balade. I called James and I said, could you call the RATP and say that you're
He called me.
bathroom?
Called me.
I just started pounding on the door and somebody stopped. And
Wow.
put in the €2 to let me out.
Oh,
Yeah,
Oh, that's
I couldn't
terrible.
get out of it. I thought, oh my goodness, and it was a Friday and I thought I'm going to be here all week.
It would not be good.
Okay.
So wait, so we have, Shirley has her hand raised.
Okay.
I
Vas-y.
have my hand raised.
Okay, well, yeah, go ahead, Shirley.
But I never had a problem because, I'm not shy. And if I had to use the toilet, I just walked into a cafe and asked them if I could.
Oh yeah. It is the best experience. It is the best way to do it. But you have to know that cafes are sometimes no, it's much better. They're much kinder and much more welcoming. At one time in Paris experience, like cafes were a very stern environment. So I can imagine some people didn't want to do it, but now they're just ask for coffee, even the most basic coffee, and go to the
Use the facility.
go to the bar. And so you ask for like un café au bar, and then you can ask them for your access to the bathroom. And a coffee at the bar, like a simple coffee, is 150, which
Yeah.
is outrageously expensive, but I mean,
when you gotta go, you
it
gotta
used to
go.
be, it used to be 3 francs a long time ago, which is 10 centimes of 10 centimes of a euro. So
Yeah.
there you go.
Would anybody else have?
Yeah, I want to
Yeah,
say
go ahead.
something.
Go ahead.
This is Joan. I'm reminded of the song, the English song about, oh dear, what can the matter be? 3 old ladies got stuck in the lavatory. You might know that. But
Yeah.
I want to bring the conversation back to cheese, because I know in Béziers, there is a cheese shop. I think it is 400 years old. Even if it's
Oh,
200 years old, it's
Yeah.
a wonderful old cheese shop in the basement of a building
Oh.
that's made of oh, I don't know, blocks of stone. Wonderful. And the cheeses are extraordinary. And there's a Comté that is at least I don't know, this huge. I mean, just huge. It's just a wonderful place. Are there shops like that in Paris?
Well, you
Of
do
course.
have them. Of course you do. I mean, it's
Yes.
because it's a little complicated because cheese has altogether become kind of a luxury item. Now it's difficult to find a cheese like a fromagerie that's not high class. So you're going to get always very it's difficult to find batch, except if you're buying your cheese in a supermarket. But if you're buying your cheese in a fromagerie, you're going to get good quality cheese.
Good quality,
Now
wonderful.
it has become such a symbol of French life, and people are willing to spend tens of euros buying cheese. That I mean, like I'm saying, like they can, speaking of Comté, you can spend a lot of money buying like a very old, very fruity Comté. It's going to cost you maybe like 30, 40 euros. So you can, let's say you're invited and they say, like, can you bring the cheese? It's a possibility that you might spend 70, 80 euros on the cheese.
Yeah.
So it is by definition now a premium product. It's not anymore something that you just buy like that, but it is how you show that you care for somebody or that you care for your guests. And it's still a conversation opener and a cultural symbol, but it's not an everyday item. People don't buy because of price, because of uh, uh, diet requirements, and because of changing changing culture. It's not an everyday occurrence anymore, but it is still a privileged moment in French culture.
Yeah,
And
I
people
mean, and
still love.
going to the cheese shop, I mean, you can
Yeah,
have interesting conversations with the cheese
it's
man.
something that you
They are experts.
it's like something you share, like good wine. And usually
Yes.
good wine and good cheese and good bread come together, but it is more limited in terms of how often it happens. And I see it. I mean, when we were young, it was more of an everyday occurrence. People like cheese, and that's just the way it was. Now it's more after a good meal, you have cheese plus wine plus bread, and it's a more specific, curated experience. But I think, to be fair, I think that's how a lot of how a lot of cultural symbols become. They're more curated. They're less obvious, and they're less open to everybody.
Oh, yeah,
But the
younger
dîner has
generations
changed
have,
too.
yeah, I mean, the younger generations have different tastes. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, like
they drink less
we
wine, they
don't
eat
know.
less cheese, they
you
eat
know
less bread.
Victoria and I were like the first generation where eating cheese was not a necessity. It was more a question of taste. And the younger generation, it's like they see their parents, and so they don't eat bread, they don't eat cheese, they don't eat that. So it's more curated, but it still symbolizes um French life. French life is all
Yes,
about
it
cheese.
does.
It's not all about cheese, but it's still very much knowing about cheese, like you know about wine.
All right, James.
There are very few cultures where knowing about cheese is considered a standard of a country's culture.
Sure.
Okay, James,
Okay, well,
Okay.
I had
yes,
a
I mean,
blast
we have run overtime here, but thank you
so
everybody
much. I mean, I had a
for
blast.
the good discussion.
It was a good
and-
discussion. I loved it. I hope you all enjoyed it.
Oh, merci beaucoup. Yes, it was wonderful.
Merci beaucoup. I loved presenting it. Saint-Germain-en-Laye is really a wonderful place, and I'm looking forward to our next balade.
Thank you,
La
James,
balade.
for all your work,
Oh,
and
thank you all.
thank you for all of you for joining us this morning.
It was wonderful having all of
Merci
you.
beaucoup.
Thank you very
Merci.
much.
Bonne nuit.
Au revoir tout le monde.
Au revoir tout le
Au
monde.
revoir, au revoir.
Ah,
Bon
au revoir.
week-end.
Merci. Au
Bon
revoir.
week-end à tous.
Merci, merci.
Merci.